February 17th, 2010. Cairo, Egypt. The Journal of the American Medical Association publishes DNA results that rewrite everything we know about King Tutankhamun, the boy pharaoh who ruled Egypt 3,300 years ago. The golden mask. The treasure. The curse. Scientists extracted DNA from Tut's mummy, and from two tiny mummified fetuses found buried with him in his tomb. And what they discovered is worse than any curse. King Tut's parents were brother and sister, full siblings, same mother, same father. The DNA match is 100%. No ambiguity, no doubt. His mother and father shared both parents. This wasn't a scandal hidden by ancient scribes. This wasn't a rumor. This was deliberate, intentional, official policy. And it gets worse. The scientists traced Tut's family tree back 5 generations. 5 generations of brother-sister marriages, uncle-niece unions. The Egyptian royal family practiced the most extreme inbreeding in recorded history, and the consequences are written in Tut's bones. His left foot was clubbed, deformed, twisted, unable to bear weight. His skull was elongated, stretched vertically in a way that suggests genetic abnormality. He had a cleft palate. The roof of his mouth didn't form properly. He couldn't walk without assistance. In his tomb, archaeologists found 130 walking sticks. 130. A 19-year-old king who needed a cane to stand. And here's the part that makes it unbearable. Tut tried to have children. His wife was Ankhesenamun, his half-sister. Because of course she was. They had 2 pregnancies. Both babies were stillborn. Both were mummified and buried in Tut's tomb. When scientists analyzed their DNA in 2010, they found the same genetic disasters: severe deformities, spina bifida, scoliosis. The inbreeding that created Tut destroyed his children before they could breathe. This is the real story of King Tutankhamun. Not the golden boy, not the treasures, the genetic catastrophe of 5 generations of royal incest. And it starts with a family that believed they were gods. November 4th, 1922. Valley of the Kings, Egypt. British archaeologist Howard Carter is excavating a barren patch of desert. He's been searching for Tut's tomb for 6 years. His wealthy patron, Lord Carnarvon, is about to cut funding. This is Carter's last season. Then a worker's shovel hits stone, a step, then another. 16 steps leading down into solid rock. At the bottom, a sealed doorway. Carter makes a small hole in the upper left corner. He holds up a candle, peers inside. Lord Carnarvon, standing behind him, asks, "Can you see anything?" Carter's response becomes legend. "Yes, wonderful things." The tomb is intact, untouched for over 3,000 years. 4 rooms packed with treasures, golden chariots, alabaster vases, furniture inlaid with ivory and gold, jewelry, weapons, food, wine, everything a pharaoh would need in the afterlife. And in the burial chamber, a solid gold coffin. Inside, Tut's mummy, face covered by a golden mask weighing 24 pounds. Lapis lazuli, turquoise, carnelian, the most famous artifact in archaeological history. But Carter notices something strange immediately. The mummy is in terrible condition. Tut's body had been soaked in embalming oils and resins, far more than normal. When Carter's team unwrapped the mummy, it fell apart. The arms, the legs, the torso. Pieces. The embalmers had botched the mummification. Tut's heart was missing. In Egyptian belief, the heart was weighed in the afterlife to determine worthiness. Without it, Tut couldn't enter the afterlife. Someone had made a catastrophic error. or something had gone very wrong. Even stranger, Tut's penis had broken off, erect. The embalmers had positioned it at a 90-degree angle, wrapped in linen, coated in resin, and it had snapped. This wasn't normal. Nothing about this burial was normal. For 80 years, Egyptologists debated how Tut died. Murder? Chariot accident? Infection? In 1968, X-rays revealed a bone fragment inside Tut's skull. Murder theory exploded. Someone had bashed his head in. Except in 2005, a CT scan showed the fragment was from modern mishandling, probably when Carter's team unwrapped the mummy. The murder theory collapsed. Then, in 2010, the DNA study changed everything. The team, led by Egyptian geneticist Zahi Hawass, extracted DNA from Tut's mummy and from 10 other mummies believed to be his relatives. They tested for genetic markers, family relationships, diseases. The results were published in JAMA, the most prestigious medical journal in the world. First discovery: Tut's parents were siblings. The DNA showed a 100% match for parental consanguinity. Brother-sister union. Not cousins. Not half-siblings. Full siblings. Second discovery: Tut had malaria. Plasmodium falciparum, the deadliest strain. DNA from the malaria parasite was found in his bones. Third discovery: Tut had multiple genetic disorders, Kola disease, bone necrosis in his left foot. His second and third metatarsals were fused. His foot was clubbed, twisted inward. He couldn't walk properly. Fourth discovery: the 2 mummified fetuses in his tomb were his daughters. Both showed severe genetic abnormalities. One had spina bifida, the other had Sprengel's deformity, a twisted spine and elevated shoulder blade. Both were products of Tut's marriage to his half-sister Ankhesenamun. The inbreeding that created Tut had destroyed his bloodline completely. Here's what the DNA revealed about Tut's family tree. It's worse than you think. Tut's father was Akhenaten, the heretic pharaoh who tried to replace Egypt's traditional gods with worship of a single sun deity. Akhenaten ruled from 1353 to 1336 BC. His wife, Tut's mother, was his full sister. Her name is unknown. The mummy is labeled KV35YL, Younger Lady, from tomb KV35. She died young, mid-20s, possibly in childbirth. Akhenaten's parents were Amenhotep III and Queen T. Amenhotep III's parents were Thutmose IV and Mutemwia. Thutmose IV's parents were Amenhotep II and Tia. Every generation practiced sibling marriage or uncle-niece unions. This wasn't occasional. This was systematic. For 5 generations, the 18th dynasty pharaohs married within their immediate family. Why? Divine kingship. Egyptian pharaohs believed they were living gods, descendants of Ra, the sun god, and Osiris, god of the afterlife. To preserve divine blood, they couldn't marry commoners. They couldn't even marry nobles. They had to marry other gods. Their siblings. The Greek historian Diodorus Siculus, writing in the 1st century BC, noted that Egyptian law actually required pharaohs to marry their sisters. Whether this was true or an exaggeration, the archaeological evidence is clear. It happened, repeatedly, for centuries. And the consequences were catastrophic. Geneticists call it inbreeding depression. When close relatives reproduce, recessive genes, normally harmless because everyone carries different ones, get matched up. Both parents carry the same defective gene. The child inherits 2 copies, and the genetic disorder manifests. With first-generation sibling unions, the risk of genetic abnormalities increases by about 50%. With 5 generations of sustained inbreeding, The risk approaches certainty. Tut's genome was a genetic disaster. His coefficient of inbreeding, a measure of genetic similarity between parents, was higher than any documented human population in history, higher than isolated island populations, higher than royal European dynasties, higher than anything. And his body showed it. His clubfoot wasn't just cosmetic. Bone analysis shows he had Kohler disease, a condition where bone tissue in the foot dies from lack of blood supply. It's excruciatingly painful. Every step would have hurt. Tut couldn't run, couldn't walk long distances, couldn't ride horses properly. The 130 walking sticks in his tomb weren't ceremonial. They were medical devices. He needed them to function. His cleft palate would have affected his speech, made eating difficult, increased susceptibility to infections. His elongated skull, once thought to be a stylistic choice in Egyptian art, was real. CT scans confirm it. His skull was abnormally long, suggesting cranial deformities common in severe inbreeding, and his immune system was compromised. The malaria that killed him was endemic in ancient Egypt. Most people survived it. Tut didn't. His body couldn't fight it. Let's talk about the two dead babies. In 1922, when Carter opened Tut's tomb, he found two small wooden coffins in the treasury room. Inside, mummified fetuses, premature, carefully wrapped, buried with full royal honors. For decades, no one knew who they were. In 2010, DNA testing confirmed they were Tut's daughters. Both from his wife, Ankhesenamun, his half-sister, daughter of Akhenaten and Nefertiti. The first fetus was about 5 to 6 months gestation, severely premature. Analysis showed spina bifida. The spine didn't form properly. The neural tube failed to close during development. This is a genetic condition, often linked to inbreeding. The second fetus was closer to full term, 7 to 8 months. But she had Sprengel's deformity, a congenital condition where the shoulder blade is elevated and the spine is twisted. Also linked to genetic disorders. Neither baby survived. Both pregnancies ended in stillbirth. And these weren't Ankhesenamun's only pregnancies. Evidence suggests there may have been more. Miscarriages, stillbirths. The royal bloodline was collapsing. Tut and Ankhesenamun represented the end of the 18th dynasty's direct line. After Tut died, Ankhesenamun disappeared from records. She may have been forced to marry Ai, Tut's elderly advisor who became pharaoh, but she had no children with him. The divine bloodline, 5 generations of carefully controlled inbreeding, had destroyed itself. Now here's where the story gets even darker. Tut died around age 19. The exact cause is still debated, but the 2010 DNA study found malaria parasites in his bones. Combined with his weakened immune system from genetic disorders, malaria likely killed him. But his death was sudden. His tomb wasn't ready. KV62, Tut's tomb, is tiny, laughably small for a pharaoh. It's believed to have been a private tomb, possibly for Ai, that was hastily converted when Tut died unexpectedly. The burial was rushed. The mummification was botched. The tomb was packed with treasures looted from other royal burials. Items with other pharaohs' names scratched out, and Tut's name carved in. Everything about Tut's burial suggests panic, chaos, a scramble to bury a king who died too young, too suddenly, without proper preparation. And then, the embalmers made their catastrophic errors. They used too much resin. So much that when Carter opened the coffin in 1922, Tut's mummy was stuck to the bottom, glued by solidified oils. Carter's team had to chip him out. Pieces of skin came off, bones broke. The mummy was destroyed in the extraction, and the missing heart, still unexplained. Some Egyptologists think it was removed and lost during the rushed mummification. Others think it decomposed because of the excessive oils. Either way, according to Egyptian belief, Tut couldn't reach the afterlife without it. The boy king, crippled by inbreeding, killed by disease, buried in a borrowed tomb, with a botched mummification that condemned him to spiritual oblivion. The divine bloodline's final joke. But the story doesn't end with Tut's burial. It continues with the curse. On April 5th, 1923, less than 5 months after Carter opened Tut's tomb, Lord Carnarvon died in Cairo, age 57. Official cause: infected mosquito bite that led to blood poisoning. But the newspapers had a better story: the curse of the pharaohs. Reports claimed that at the exact moment of Carnarvon's death, all the lights in Cairo went out. His dog in England howled and dropped dead. Pure fiction, but it sold papers. Then other deaths followed. George J. Gould, American financier who visited the tomb, died of fever 4 months after Carnarvon. Aubrey Herbert, Carnarvon's half-brother, died in September 1923. Wolf Joel, South African millionaire visitor, died 1924. Arthur Mace, Carter's assistant who opened the sealed door, died 1928, never recovering from mysterious illness. Richard Bethel, Carter's secretary, died 1929. Found dead in bed, age 46, cause unknown. His father, Lord Westbury, committed suicide weeks later by jumping from a building. 6 deaths in 7 years, all connected to the tomb. The curse narrative exploded. Newspapers tracked every death. Spiritualists claimed ancient Egyptian magic. Arthur Conan Doyle, creator of Sherlock Holmes, suggested elementals created by Tut's priests to guard the tomb. Complete nonsense, but irresistible. The curse became more famous than the archaeological find. Here's the reality. 58 people were present at the opening of Tut's tomb and burial chamber. Of those, only 8 died within a decade. That's a 14% mortality rate, completely normal for the 1920s to 1930s. Howard Carter himself lived until 1939, 17 years after opening the tomb. Died age 64 from lymphoma. No curse, no magic, no revenge. But the curse story reveals something important about how we process the past. We want mystery. We want supernatural explanations. We want ancient Egypt to be magical, cursed, otherworldly. The truth, that Tut was a disabled teenager from 5 generations of incest, who died from malaria and genetic disorders, is less romantic, less mystical, but far more tragic. Because Tut wasn't a god, he was a victim. A child born into a system that valued divine bloodline over human health. A system that practiced systematic inbreeding for political and religious reasons. A system that created him, crippled him, and killed him. The golden mask hides a face twisted by genetic catastrophe. The treasures buried with him were meant to ease his journey to an afterlife he couldn't reach because his embalmers fucked up. The curse isn't supernatural, it's genetic. The curse is inbreeding, and it destroyed an entire dynasty. Let's zoom out. Why did the 18th dynasty practice such extreme inbreeding? Politics and religion merged in ancient Egypt. The pharaoh wasn't just a king, he was a living god, the son of Ra, the embodiment of Horus. To maintain divine status, the bloodline had to remain pure. Marrying outside the royal family would dilute the divine essence. But here's the problem. There was no genetic understanding in ancient Egypt. They didn't know about recessive genes. They didn't understand heredity. They saw strong pharaohs and weak pharaohs, healthy children and sick children, but they couldn't connect it to breeding patterns. They believed divine blood was inherently superior, that God's children would be strong, healthy, powerful. When children were born sick or deformed, they blamed evil spirits, curses, or the mother's behavior during pregnancy, never the breeding system itself. And so the system continued, generation after generation. Brother marrying sister, uncle marrying niece, father sometimes marrying daughter. The 18th dynasty wasn't unique. Earlier dynasties did it. Later dynasties did it. But the 18th dynasty, Tut's dynasty, took it to an extreme. And when Tut died without an heir, the dynasty collapsed. I ruled for 4 years. Then Horemheb, a military general with no royal blood, took the throne. The divine bloodline ended. The 19th dynasty began with Ramesses I, a commoner. The entire theological justification for royal inbreeding had failed. The gods' children couldn't reproduce. The divine blood had destroyed itself. Now compare this to other royal families. European royals practiced cousin marriage for centuries. The Habsburgs are the most famous example. Charles II of Spain, died 1700, was the product of generations of uncle-niece and cousin marriages. He was severely disabled. Couldn't chew food, couldn't speak clearly, possibly infertile. His autopsy described a body without a single drop of blood, and testicles black as coal. The Habsburg jaw, mandibular prognathism, became so extreme that Charles II's tongue was too large for his mouth. He drooled constantly. The Spanish Habsburg line ended with him, but even the Habsburgs didn't practice sibling marriage. That was too extreme even for them. The Ptolemies of Egypt, Cleopatra's dynasty, practiced sibling marriage extensively, at least 10 documented brother-sister unions over 3 centuries. But they were Greeks ruling Egypt. They adopted the practice from earlier Egyptian dynasties, and their dynasty also collapsed, ending with Cleopatra VII's death in 30 BC. The pattern is clear. Royal inbreeding works for a few generations, then the genetic load becomes too heavy. Children die young. Heirs can't reproduce. The dynasty ends. Every time. Without exception. Tut's dynasty lasted longer than most. 5 generations. But the cost was catastrophic. A crippled king who died at 19, 2 stillborn heirs, a bloodline that destroyed itself from within. Here's what makes Tut's story even more tragic. He probably knew something was wrong. Ancient Egyptian medicine was surprisingly advanced. They understood broken bones, infections, surgical procedures. They had anatomical knowledge from mummification. Tut would have known his foot was deformed. He would have felt the pain. He would have noticed he couldn't do things other men could do. And when his first daughter was stillborn, deformed, he would have seen the pattern. When the second pregnancy ended the same way, the evidence was undeniable. His children were dying because of something in his blood, in his family. But he couldn't stop it. He was pharaoh. He had to marry within the royal family, had to produce an heir, had to continue the divine bloodline. The system trapped him. And when he died at 19, weakened by genetic disorders and killed by malaria, he left no heir, no son, no future. Just 2 tiny mummies buried beside him. Evidence of a dynasty eating itself. The golden mask hides all of this. When you see Tut's treasures in museums, you see wealth, power, glory. You don't see the 130 walking sticks, the clubfoot, the cleft palate, the stillborn children. You don't see the genetic catastrophe. That's intentional. Museums curate glory. They display power. They sell tickets with golden masks and divine kings. But the DNA tells a different story. The DNA reveals the cost of treating humans like gods. The DNA shows what happens when politics and religion trump biology. The DNA proves that royal blood isn't special. It's just blood. And when you inbreed it for 5 generations, it destroys you. In 2010, when the DNA results were published, some Egyptologists were furious. They argued that Western scientists were imposing modern moral judgments on ancient practices, that calling it inbreeding was culturally insensitive, that the study sensationalized Tut's disabilities. But the science doesn't judge. It reports. Tut's parents were siblings. That's a fact. His children were deformed from inbreeding. That's a fact. His foot was crippled from genetic disorders. That's a fact. The DNA doesn't care about cultural sensitivity. It records what happened. And what happened was a genetic disaster that killed a dynasty. Some have argued that perhaps Egyptian royal sibling marriage wasn't always consummated, that it was ceremonial, political alliances without sexual relationships. But the DNA from Tut's children proves otherwise. His daughters were genetically his. Ankhesenamun was genetically his half-sister. The marriages were real. The sex happened. The children were conceived. And they died because of it. There's no way to romanticize this. No way to spin it as anything other than what it was. Systematic inbreeding that crippled and killed. Today, Tut's mummy rests in a climate-controlled case in his tomb in the Valley of the Kings. His golden mask is in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. His treasures tour the world, drawing millions of visitors. And the DNA evidence sits in scientific journals, read by specialists, but unknown to most people who see the golden mask and think treasure instead of tragedy. But the truth matters. Because Tut's story isn't ancient history, it's a warning, a demonstration of what happens when power systems value ideology over biology. When religion trumps science. When humans are treated as symbols instead of people. The Egyptian pharaohs believed they were gods. They built pyramids, they commanded armies, they ruled empires, but they couldn't escape genetics. 5 generations of inbreeding created a crippled king who died at 19, leaving 2 dead daughters and no heir. The divine blood destroyed itself. The golden mask covers a genetic catastrophe, and the DNA doesn't lie. It records the truth that ancient scribes wouldn't write and modern museums don't want to display. King Tut wasn't a golden god. He was a disabled teenager, born from incest, killed by disease, buried in failure. That's the story his bones tell. That's the truth his DNA reveals.